Have you ever wondered what truly happens in heaven on Good Friday? While many are planning lunch, organizing for the holiday, or simply enjoying a day off, there's a profound and invisible spiritual reality unfolding around us. It's as if on this day, time stands still, as if angels kneel in silence and God himself looks with tears upon humanity, because it was exactly on this day, more than 2,000 years ago, that the Son of God was crucified. Yes, crucified for love of me, for love of you. And that's why Good Friday can never, ever be lived as just another day. Father Pio, the saint of the stigmata, who literally carried in his body the pains of Christ's passion, firmly stated, "On Good Friday, the soul must place itself at the foot of the cross, and not leave until the heart has been transformed." But unfortunately, thousands of Catholics around the world make serious mistakes on this day, some due to lack of formation, others through negligence. And the result is tragic. Good Friday passes, and the soul remains untouched. The cross is celebrated, but the heart remains far from Christ. In this video, we'll reveal the 7 mistakes that, according to Father Pio's spiritual teachings, most wound the heart of Jesus on the Friday of the Passion. But first, I need to make a sincere invitation to you. Watch with an open heart. This is not content merely to inform, it's to transform. Because if you love Christ, then today is the day to prove that love, not with words, but with concrete gestures of reverence, gratitude, and penance. If you believe in Father Pio's wisdom, write in the comments, "Father Pio, intercede for me in my moments of darkness." The first thing we need to understand is that Christ's passion is not merely an event of the past. In the vision of many saints, including St. John Paul II, St. Faustina, and Father Pio himself, Christ's suffering continues to be renewed each time sin is repeated, each time humanity rejects the cross. Father Pio would say, "The world continues to crucify the Lord, and the worst part is that many Catholics help in this crucifixion." Strong, isn't it? But it's a truth that needs to be spoken. Because Christ's cross wasn't just made of wood. It remains alive in the pain of so many people, in betrayals, in offenses, in the coldness of hearts. And that's why Good Friday is a day of silence, of mourning, and of deep contemplation. It's not a time for parties, for distractions, for excessive consumption. It's a sacred invitation to stop, look upward, and allow yourself to be touched by the greatest proof of love in history. When Father Pio contemplated the cross, he didn't just see a religious symbol. He saw an altar of sacrifice, a throne of mercy, a book of wisdom that teaches us the most important lesson we could ever learn, that true love gives itself completely. The Church understands this profound reality. That's why on Good Friday, everything changes. The altar is stripped bare, images are covered, the tabernacle stands empty. There is no celebration of the Mass, the only day of the year when this happens. It's as if the entire Church enters into mourning, into a holy grief that acknowledges the weight of what happened on Calvary. And yet, how many of us treat this day as just another holiday? How many miss the extraordinary graces available to those who truly enter into the mystery of the Passion? This is why Father Pio would often say, "To understand Good Friday is to understand the heart of our faith, because on this day heaven and earth meet at the cross, mercy and justice embrace, and your soul is invited to a sacred encounter with the suffering Christ." Let us now examine the serious mistakes that Father Pio identified, mistakes that prevent us from receiving the extraordinary graces of this holy day. This is perhaps the most common and serious mistake. Many people view Good Friday as simply a day off on the calendar. They take advantage of it to sleep in later, have barbecues, travel, binge-watch series. While all of heaven is in profound silence, Father Pio said with pain in his heart, "How can a Catholic eat and drink with joy while the Lord is suspended between heaven and earth, shedding his blood for us?" Good Friday is the only day of the year when the Holy Mass is not celebrated. The Church enters into silence, The images are covered, the altar stripped bare. Everything points to emptiness, to the absence of the bridegroom. It is a day of fasting, abstinence, and meditation. Living this day with frivolity or indifference is to close your heart to the deepest mystery of our faith. I once met a woman who shared with me how she had always treated Good Friday as just another holiday, until she attended a special service at her parish. For the first time, she told me, I truly felt what it means to stand at the foot of the cross. I wept as I never had before, realizing that my casual attitude toward this day had been a form of ingratitude toward what Jesus endured for me. This transformation is what Father Pio hoped for all believers. He wanted us to feel, truly feel, the weight of this day, not to be crushed by sadness, but to be awakened to love. When we treat Good Friday as just another day off, we miss an opportunity for profound grace. We pass by the cross as the indifferent crowds did 2,000 years ago, not recognizing the miracle of love taking place before our eyes. So how should we approach this sacred day? Father Pio would counsel us to mark it as different, set apart. Wake early for prayer. Create an atmosphere of reverent silence in your home. Limit conversations to what is necessary. Turn off entertainment. Place yourself in spirit at the foot of the cross. Because when you honor this day with the reverence it deserves, something remarkable happens. Your heart begins to beat in rhythm with the heart of Christ. Your priorities shift, your perspective changes, and suddenly, what seemed like restrictive religious observances become the very pathway to profound freedom. Did you know that Good Friday is one of only 2 days of the year when the Church mandates, not merely recommends, fasting and abstinence from meat? And yet, how many ignore this guidance? Father Pio was very strict about this. He fasted frequently, but on Good Friday his fast was complete. He would say, Christ's flesh was torn on the cross. How can I eat meat on this day? Fasting is not merely a physical act. It is a spiritual act of union with the cross. And more, fasting should not be experienced as a forced sacrifice, but as an offering of love. When you feel hunger on this day and offer this discomfort as reparation for the sins of the world, you are in some way helping Jesus carry the cross. It's a small gesture, but a powerful one. Many Catholics today have lost the understanding of why we fast. It's not about following rules or earning God's favor. Rather, it's about creating a physical reminder of our spiritual hunger. When your stomach growls with emptiness, let it remind you of the emptiness of a world without Christ's sacrifice. Father Pio understood this connection deeply. For him, fasting was a form of participation in Christ's suffering. It was a way of saying, Lord, I choose to deny myself today in recognition of how you denied yourself everything for me. The Church's guidelines are simple. On Good Friday, Catholics aged 18 to 59 are asked to eat only 1 full meal and 2 smaller meals that together don't equal a full meal. All Catholics 14 and older should abstain from meat. But beyond these minimal requirements, Father Pio would encourage us to go deeper, perhaps by fasting from media, unnecessary conversations, or anything that diverts our attention from the cross. When we embrace hunger on Good Friday, something profound happens. Our prayers become more focused, our hearts more sensitive, our spirits more attuned to the divine presence. And suddenly, what seemed like a burden becomes a blessed opportunity to draw closer to the heart of our suffering Savior. As we continue our journey through Father Pio's wisdom about Good Friday, I want to share something special with you. Many of you have asked how to deepen your spiritual connection with this holy saint who understood Christ's passion so profoundly. That's why we've created the Spiritual Secrets of St. Padre Pio ebook. This isn't just another spiritual guide. It contains powerful prayers, reflections based on his teachings, and practical advice to strengthen your spirituality throughout the year, not just during Holy Week. Just as Father Pio could see beyond the physical reality of the cross to its deeper spiritual meaning, this resource will help you discover the extraordinary graces available in your everyday life. Click the link pinned in the comments to access this spiritual treasure that has already transformed thousands of faithful lives. Now, let's continue our reflection on the mistakes we must avoid on Good Friday, as Father Pio would guide us. On Good Friday, the Church offers us one of the most profound and moving celebrations of the year, the Liturgy of the Passion. In this service, we venerate the cross, listen to the Passion Gospel according to John, and pray for all of humanity. Father Pio would say, "One who does not kneel before the cross on earth may never kneel before it in heaven." Powerful, isn't it? Not participating in this celebration is wasting the chance to enter Calvary with Jesus. It's like standing outside the tomb while the saints enter in silence to keep vigil over Christ's body. The Liturgy of the Passion has ancient origins, dating back to the early church in Jerusalem. It's not a mass, there is no consecration, but rather a solemn service centered on the cross itself. When we participate, we join with believers across the centuries who have stood in reverent awe before the mystery of salvation. I will never forget witnessing an elderly man at the veneration of the cross during one Good Friday service. With trembling steps, he approached the crucifix. When he knelt to kiss the wood, tears streamed down his weathered face. Later he explained, "Every year I come to say thank you, because without that cross I would have no hope." This is the spirit Father Pio wished for all of us, to approach the cross not as distant observers, but as grateful recipients of its grace. To touch the wood, to kiss it reverently, to allow ourselves to be moved by what it represents. The Liturgy of the Passion invites us into this sacred space where heaven touches earth, where time seems to stand still, where the eternal sacrifice is made present in a unique way. To miss this opportunity is to remain at a distance from the very heart of our faith. It's like receiving an invitation to stand with Mary and John at the foot of the cross and choosing instead to stay home. Another very common mistake is to look at the cross with banality. How many people wear crucifixes around their necks, but live as if Christ never suffered? How many Catholics have crucifixes at home, but never kneel before them to pray, to give thanks, to contemplate? Father Pio said that the cross is not an ornament. It is a portal, an altar, a school of love. When we look at the cross with faith, we don't see wood. We see a throne, the throne of the purest love that exists. On Good Friday, the cross should occupy the center of the house, the center of the heart, the center of life. This symbol has become so familiar that we risk losing sight of its shocking reality. The cross was an instrument of torture, the electric chair of the ancient world. And yet, through Christ's sacrifice, it has become the sign of our salvation. The place where love conquered death. Father Pio understood this paradox deeply. That's why he would spend hours gazing at the crucifix, often with tears streaming down his face. For him, it wasn't just a religious symbol, it was a window into divine love. How different would our faith be if we recaptured this perspective? If we looked at the crucifix in our homes, not as decoration, but as a reminder of the greatest sacrifice in history. On Good Friday especially, Father Pio encourages us to place the cross in a place of honor, to approach it with reverence, to touch it, to speak to it, to let it speak to us. Because when we truly see the cross for what it is, the meeting place of heaven and earth, of justice and mercy, of death and life, everything changes. Our petty complaints fade away. Our priorities realign. Our hearts expand to receive the love that flowed from Christ's wounds. The cross is not merely a symbol of what happened long ago. It is the ever-present reminder that we are loved beyond measure, that no suffering is meaningless when united to Christ's, that death never has the final word. Father Pio affirmed with vehemence, confession is the bath of the soul, and no one should approach the cross dirty with sin. It's astonishing how many Catholics participate in Good Friday, say prayers, perhaps even become emotional before the Passion, but do not seek confession. It's like washing your face, but ignoring that your heart is still stained. Holy Week is a time of reconciliation, and Friday is the pinnacle of that call. Christ himself gave himself up to redeem us. And how can we say thank you if we continue to reject the grace of conversion? Father Pio would spend hours in the confessional during Lent, and he would say that Jesus' greatest sadness wasn't the nails, but the hardened hearts that don't want to change. If you haven't confessed yet, don't delay any longer. The cross is open to receive you, but salvation needs your response. The sacrament of confession was particularly sacred to Father Pio. He could often see the state of souls approaching him and would weep with joy when sinners returned to grace. "When I absolve someone," he once said, "I am participating in the ongoing work of Calvary. Each confession continues what began on the cross." This perspective transforms how we understand this sacrament. It's not about guilt or shame or checking boxes. It's about allowing the blood of Christ to wash over the wounds of our sins. It's about standing at the foot of the cross and receiving what flows from his side, mercy without measure. On Good Friday especially, our hearts should be prepared to receive the full impact of Christ's sacrifice. And this preparation necessarily includes the purification of confession. Just as you would never visit a king wearing muddy clothes, don't approach the King of Kings on the day of his greatest sacrifice while still carrying unconfessed sin. The confessional stands ready, a fountain of mercy flowing directly from the cross. How many people spend the day listening to loud music, talking too much, scrolling through their phone feeds, and forget to silence their souls? Father Pio was a man of very few words. He would say, "Silence is the language of heaven," and on Good Friday, the heavens speak with tears. If you want to hear God's voice, you need to be silent. Turn off your phone for a few hours. Avoid unnecessary conversations. Withdraw inwardly. Feel the weight of the cross, the pain of Mary, the surrender of Christ. It is in silence that the Holy Spirit acts most profoundly. Our modern world has lost the art of silence. We fill every moment with noise, with stimulation, with distraction. We fear the emptiness, the stillness, the quiet moments when we might actually hear the whispers of our own hearts or the voice of God. But Father Pio knew that true spiritual growth happens in silence. It's in those quiet spaces that we begin to perceive reality as it truly is, that we recognize the whispers of grace, that we feel the gentle pull of divine love. On Good Friday especially, this silence becomes sacred. Just as the earth fell silent when Christ breathed his last, our souls too should enter into that holy hush. Practical silence might mean setting aside designated hours without technology. It might mean creating a quiet prayer space in your home. It might mean taking a solitary walk without music or podcasts, just allowing your heart to commune with the suffering Christ. This silence isn't empty, it's pregnant with meaning. It's not the absence of sound, but the presence of a deeper listening. As Father Pio would say, in the silence of the heart, God speaks. When we cultivate this inner stillness on Good Friday, we create space for the mystery of the cross to penetrate our busy minds and distracted hearts. We allow ourselves to be present, truly present at Calvary, standing in reverent awe before love's greatest sacrifice. The last error that Father Pio warns us about is perhaps the most subtle: praying mechanically. On Good Friday, many pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, the Stations of the Cross, penitential prayers, but without emotional or spiritual involvement. Father Pio used to say, "A single sincere tear before the cross is worth more than 1,000 empty words." Praying with the heart means allowing Jesus' pain to touch you. It's letting the words penetrate, allowing the soul to be moved, letting pride be broken. In the Stations of the Cross, for example, it's not enough to simply repeat, "Jesus falls for the third time." You need to imagine that scene, feel the weight of the cross, hear the crowd mocking, see Mary's gaze, and say, "Lord, I am here. I will not leave you alone." Praying with the heart is loving deeply. It's the prayer that rises like perfume to heaven, and that heals the soul. The problem with mechanical prayer is that it creates the illusion of devotion without its reality. We can go through the motions, checking spiritual boxes, while our hearts remain distant and cold. This is precisely what Father Pio warned against. He understood that true prayer changes us. It isn't about informing God, who already knows all, but about transforming our own hearts through genuine encounter. On Good Friday especially, our prayers should be drenched with love, with gratitude, with wonder at the sacrifice made for us. Each word should be weighted with meaning, spoken not just with lips, but with the entire being. This might mean praying less, but praying better. Taking time with each station of the cross to truly enter the scene. Reading the Passion narrative slowly, allowing each detail to sink deep into your consciousness. Speaking to Christ on the cross, as you would to a beloved friend who is suffering for your sake. Because when prayer becomes a genuine conversation of love, heaven and earth meet. The veil between time and eternity grows thin. And suddenly, Calvary is not a distant historical event, but a present reality in which we participate with our whole hearts. Father Pio lived Good Friday with impressive spiritual intensity. His stigmata would bleed more strongly. His countenance would become grave. His eyes would remain in tears almost the entire day. Witnesses said that he would spend hours before the crucifix, in silence, completely immersed in the mystery of the Passion. Once someone asked him, "Father, what do you feel when you meditate on the cross?" And he replied, "I feel that each drop of Christ's blood has a name, and that one of those drops fell for me." This awareness of Christ's personal sacrifice transformed everything. Father Pio didn't experience Good Friday as a spectator. He placed himself in the scene. He knelt beside Mary, wept with John, kissed the feet of Jesus, and said, "I am here, Lord." This is the posture we are called to have. The stigmata that Father Pio bore were not just physical wounds. They were the outward sign of his profound inner communion with Christ's suffering. Those who witnessed him on Good Friday often spoke of how his pain seemed to intensify, how the blood flowed more freely from his hands, feet, and side. But even more striking than the physical manifestations was his spiritual absorption. One of his spiritual sons described it this way: "On Good Friday, it was as if Father Pio was no longer with us, though we could see him physically. His spirit seemed to be on Calvary, standing with Our Lady at the foot of the cross." This is the depth of spiritual identification that made Father Pio such a powerful vessel of grace. He didn't just commemorate the Passion, he lived it. He allowed it to penetrate every fiber of his being, to shape his entire existence, and he invited all who came to him to enter into this same mystery. Not necessarily through physical stigmata, but through the stigmata of the heart, the willing acceptance of suffering transformed by love. The cross, he would often say, is the only door to life. There is no other way. These weren't mere words for him. They were the lived reality that gave meaning to every moment of his existence, and that can give meaning to ours as well. Perhaps you're reading this and realizing that you've already committed some or even all of these mistakes on previous Good Fridays. Perhaps you've lived this day as a holiday. You've eaten meat, ignored the liturgy, kept hidden sins, lived in noise and prayed without soul. But here's the good news: God's mercy is greater than any mistake. And Father Pio insisted, the Lord does not look for perfection, but for hearts willing to begin again. If you've come this far, it's because the Holy Spirit is calling you to a new spiritual experience. Today is the day to change, to surrender, to live this next Good Friday as if it were your last. Here are 7 practical attitudes inspired by Father Pio's advice to live this date with depth. Begin the day in silent prayer, offering it as reparation. Fast with faith and offer your hunger as a sacrifice for the conversion of souls. Distance yourself from distractions. Avoid social media, series, entertainment. Do the stations of the cross calmly, meditating on each station. Participate in the liturgy of the Passion, if possible, kneeling before the cross. Pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet at 3 p.m., the hour of Christ's death. Give profound thanks for each of Jesus' wounds. They were for you. These aren't just religious practices to check off a list. They're invitations to enter into the mystery of Christ's sacrifice. Each one opens a different door into the reality of Calvary. Each one offers a unique grace. And remember, the goal isn't to earn God's love. That's already freely given. The goal is to position your heart to receive what's already being poured out, to remove the obstacles that prevent you from experiencing the full impact of Christ's sacrifice. As Father Pio would often tell his spiritual children, the cross is heavy only for those who resist it. When we surrender to its mystery, even the burden becomes light, even the sorrow becomes sweet, because we discover that on the other side of Calvary lies resurrection, not just Christ's, but our own. Good Friday is marked by pain, silence, and darkness, but it is not the end of the story. On the horizon of the cross, the light of resurrection already shines. Father Pio would say, those who embrace the cross with love also embrace the empty tomb on Sunday. Therefore, living Good Friday well is preparing the heart for the true Easter. Not the one with chocolate eggs, but of the soul that resurrects in Christ. Today, God invites you to climb Calvary, to not avert your eyes, to not flee from the pain, to not soften the cross, because only after dying with Christ can we truly resurrect with Him. The beauty of our faith lies in this profound paradox, that the instrument of death becomes the source of life, that the place of abandonment becomes the site of our greatest hope, that the moment of deepest darkness heralds the dawn of eternal light. Father Pio understood this mystery better than most. Through his stigmata, through his prayers, through his tireless ministry in the confessional, he demonstrated that participation in Christ's suffering leads to participation in His glory. Before we conclude, I want to leave you with a phrase that Father Pio would say to his spiritual children on this date. On Good Friday, don't just say thank you to Jesus. Say, Lord, now I also want to live for you. That is the greatest gift you can give to the Lord on this sacred day. Why not start right now? Kneel before a crucifix. Be silent. Say, Jesus, I repent. I love you.
I want Friday may be the best, the most powerful, the transformative alive.
Remember, if this message has touched your heart, write thank you, Father Pio, in the comments. Your gesture helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for being part of this spiritual community. Each video we create is a labor of love meant to spread the profound teachings of Father Pio and strengthen our Catholic faith together. Your support makes it possible for us to continue this mission of spreading hope, faith, and spiritual guidance to thousands of people who are seeking answers in their lives. If this message has touched your heart today, please consider supporting our channel by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs this message, and becoming a member of our community. Remember, every like, every share is not just a click. It's a way of helping Father Pio's wisdom reach someone who may be struggling right now. Together, we can bring the light of Christ to a world that desperately needs it. Thank you for your prayers and support. May God bless you abundantly. Have you ever felt an unexplained heaviness when holding a religious object? Have you noticed strange disturbances in your home after acquiring what seemed to be a blessed item? Dear brothers and sisters, what I'm about to share with you today could protect your soul and your family from a very real spiritual danger that's spreading silently among the faithful. St. Padre Pio always taught us that the Rosary is one of our most powerful weapons against evil. He used to say, "The Rosary is the weapon for these times." But what happens when this sacred weapon is turned against us? What happens when the very object meant to protect us becomes a trap? Right now, as you're watching this video, counterfeit rosaries are circulating among Catholics worldwide. These aren't just poorly made imitations. They're objects deliberately consecrated to evil, designed to deceive the faithful and open spiritual doorways for demonic attacks. If you believe in the wisdom and protection of Saint Padre Pio, write in the comments, "Saint Pio, guide my discernment." Your gesture helps this urgent message reach more souls who need this warning. This isn't about fear-mongering or superstition. This is about the reality that Padre Pio himself warned us about, that the devil is cunning and will try to seduce and confuse God's children under the appearance of piety. These false rosaries have been identified by exorcists and priests who have encountered them in cases of demonic infestation. Some of these dangerous objects carry hidden symbols, serpents, Masonic signs, pentagrams, or other occult markings that only become visible upon closer inspection. They're often distributed for free or sold at unusually low prices to attract unsuspecting believers. But here's what Saint Padre Pio would want you to know. You don't need to live in fear. You need to live with wisdom. Today, I'm going to share with you exactly how to identify these false rosaries, what to do if you suspect you have one, and most importantly, how to build genuine spiritual protection that no force of darkness can penetrate. The saint always reminded us that true protection doesn't come from objects alone, but from a life of prayer, frequent confession, holy mass, and devotion to Our Lady. Yet he also understood that blessed sacramentals, when authentic, can be powerful aids in our spiritual battle. By the end of this video, you'll have the knowledge to protect yourself and your loved ones from these spiritual counterfeits. You'll understand what Padre Pio really meant when he spoke about spiritual warfare, and you'll discover how to turn your rosary into the mighty weapon it was always meant to be. This knowledge has already helped thousands of faithful Catholics recognize and safely dispose of these dangerous objects. Now it's your turn to be equipped with this vital spiritual wisdom. St. Padre Pio didn't mess around when it came to spiritual warfare. This guy lived it, breathed it, and fought battles most of us can't even imagine. When he talked about the rosary being the weapon for these times, he wasn't speaking in pretty metaphors. He was sharing hard-won wisdom from the front lines of spiritual combat. You've probably heard stories about how Padre Pio's rosaries would literally break from use. His fingers would work those beads so intensely, with such fervor, that the chains couldn't handle it. But here's what most people don't realize. The saint learned something crucial through his mystical experiences that every Catholic needs to understand today. The devil doesn't always show up with horns and a pitchfork. Sometimes he comes dressed as an angel of light. Padre Pio knew this firsthand because demons would actually appear to him disguised as Christ or the Blessed Mother. Can you imagine? The enemy was so desperate to deceive this holy man that he'd masquerade as the very figures Padre Pio loved most. Through these terrifying encounters, the saint developed an almost supernatural ability to distinguish between what's genuinely from God and what's a counterfeit. And that's exactly what we're dealing with today. Spiritual counterfeits that look authentic but carry deadly consequences. Father Ambrosio Nonato Legaspi, an exorcist from the Philippines, has been sounding the alarm about something that would have made Padre Pio's blood run cold. Families are unknowingly bringing home rosaries that have been deliberately consecrated to evil. These aren't accidents or mistakes. They're weapons of spiritual warfare disguised as instruments of prayer. Think about it this way. If you were trying to infiltrate an army, wouldn't you disguise yourself as one of their soldiers? That's exactly what's happening here. The enemy is using our own sacred objects against us, turning our weapons of prayer into doorways for demonic attack. Padre Pio always said that the devil is like a rabid dog on a chain. He can bark and frighten, but he can't bite unless we get too close. But what happens when we unknowingly invite him into our homes through objects that seem holy but aren't? The saint had zero tolerance for spiritual carelessness. He insisted that blessed sacramentals should only come from trustworthy Catholic sources. Why? because he understood that it's not the rosary itself that protects you, it's God's grace working through a properly blessed object. Flip that equation, and you've got trouble. When people brought Padre Pio objects they suspected were spiritually dangerous, his response was always the same: don't panic, but don't ignore it either. He'd examine the item carefully, pray over it, and often discover that the person's gut instinct was spot on. Then he'd make sure the thing was destroyed properly, usually through prayer and sacred fire. But here's the thing that would matter most to Padre Pio. Your prayer life is your best defense. Someone who's living in the state of grace, hitting Mass regularly, going to confession, and maintaining real devotion to Our Lady. They've got built-in spiritual radar that can detect when something's off. Still, even strong Catholics can get caught off guard when evil masquerades as good. That's why the saint always emphasized the importance of getting religious objects from established Catholic sources, where you know the blessings are legitimate. Here's something that could revolutionize your spiritual life the way it did for Padre Pio. The Rosary wasn't just a prayer for him. It was a lifeline, a weapon, a direct connection to heaven. Many people today are discovering that same depth through understanding how the saint actually prayed the mysteries. We've put together something that captures this, the ebook The Power of the Rosary, with Padre Pio, miracles, protection, and divine graces. This isn't just another prayer book. It's designed to help you pray the Rosary with the same intensity and devotion that made Padre Pio's rosaries break from use. You'll discover the miracles and testimonies of people who've experienced the Rosary's real power, learn the saint's most impactful teachings about prayer, get a 30-day prayer guide with daily intentions to strengthen your faith, and access special prayers for protection, healing, and liberation. The Rosary was Padre Pio's secret weapon, and today it can be yours too. Don't let this opportunity slip by to deepen your spiritual life with something that's already transformed thousands of people. Just click the link pinned in the comments to download it. But right now, we need to talk about those counterfeit rosaries. Because the warning signs are there, and once you know what to look for, you'll never be fooled again. All right, let's get real about what we're actually dealing with here. These aren't your run-of-the-mill knockoff rosaries you might find at a tourist shop. We're talking about objects that have been deliberately crafted and consecrated by people who practice occultism and Satanism. Their goal: to slip these spiritual time bombs into the hands of unsuspecting Catholics. Father Legazpi wasn't the first exorcist to encounter this problem, and he certainly won't be the last. Priests across different continents are reporting similar cases, families experiencing unexplained disturbances, sudden spiritual oppression, or bizarre occurrences that started right after they brought home what they thought was a blessed rosary. One case that really drives this home involved a devout Catholic family who picked up a beautiful rosary from what seemed like a legitimate vendor outside a church. Within days, their peaceful home turned into something out of a horror movie. Doors slamming at night, unexplained cold spots, and worst of all, their young daughter started having nightmares about dark figures in religious clothing. It wasn't until they brought the rosary to their parish priest that they discovered the truth. Hidden symbols carved so small you'd need a magnifying glass to see them clearly. So what should you actually look for? First off, be suspicious of any rosary offered for free or at ridiculously low prices, especially from unknown vendors. Authentic, properly blessed rosaries require time, intention, and resources to create. When someone's practically giving them away, ask yourself why. Next, examine the crucifix and medals closely. Genuine Catholic rosaries will have clear, traditional imagery, but these counterfeit ones, they hide their true nature in plain sight. Look for serpents worked into decorative patterns. Sometimes they're so cleverly disguised they look like vines or ornamental scroll work. Check for inverted symbols, pentagrams hidden within stars, or Masonic imagery worked into what should be Catholic designs. The beads themselves can be telling too. Some of these fake rosaries use materials that have been specifically chosen for occult purposes, certain stones, metals, or even synthetic materials that have been charged through ritual practices. If a rosary feels unusually heavy, unnaturally cold, or gives you an inexplicable sense of unease when you handle it, trust that instinct. Here's something that might surprise you. The distribution methods are often as suspicious as the objects themselves. These things show up at flea markets, online marketplaces with no clear Catholic credentials, or from traveling vendors who appear near churches but have no connection to the parish. Some are even sent as gifts through the mail to people who never ordered them. But here's where it gets really sneaky. Sometimes these rosaries are mixed in with legitimate religious goods. A vendor might have 99 authentic rosaries and one counterfeit, just enough to slip past casual inspection, but sufficient to cause real spiritual harm. The psychological aspect is crucial too. These objects aren't just spiritually dangerous, they're designed to create doubt and confusion about authentic Catholic practices. When someone experiences negative effects from what they believe is a blessed rosary, it can shake their faith in legitimate sacramentals. That's exactly what the enemy wants. Catholics who become suspicious of their own spiritual traditions. Father Legazpi documented one particularly disturbing case where a woman received a rosary as a blessing from someone claiming to be spreading devotion to Our Lady. The rosary looked absolutely perfect. Beautiful beads, traditional crucifix, even came with a prayer card. But within a week of praying with it, she started experiencing what she described as spiritual attacks during prayer time itself. Every time she tried to pray the rosary, she'd feel overwhelmed with blasphemous thoughts, anger, or complete spiritual dryness. The breakthrough came when she brought it to an experienced priest who immediately sensed something was wrong. Under close examination with proper lighting, they discovered tiny occult symbols etched into the back of the crucifix. Symbols that would be invisible under normal circumstances, but became clear under magnification. What makes this even more insidious is that these counterfeits often target specific groups within the Catholic community. Some are designed to appeal to people with devotion to particular saints, using imagery that would attract devotees of Saint Padre Pio, Saint Therese, or Our Lady of Fatima. The creators study Catholic spirituality just enough to make their counterfeits appealing to sincere believers. There's also the timing factor. These objects often surface around major Catholic celebrations: Christmas, Easter, feast days of popular saints, or during Marian apparition anniversaries. When people's spiritual hunger is highest, when they're most likely to seek out new devotional items, that's when these spiritual counterfeits flood the market. But here's what every Catholic needs to understand. The goal isn't just to cause individual harm. These objects are part of a larger strategy to infiltrate and corrupt Catholic devotional life from within. When authentic spiritual practices become associated with negative experiences, it weakens the entire faith community. The good news: once you know what to look for, these counterfeits become much easier to spot. And more importantly, there are clear, practical steps you can take to protect yourself and your family. Let me show you exactly what to do if you suspect you've encountered one of these spiritual counterfeits. Okay, so you're holding a rosary right now and something feels off. Maybe it's that weird heaviness in your chest when you try to pray with it. Maybe it's those strange disturbances that started happening right after you brought it home. Or maybe you just spotted one of those hidden symbols we talked about. What now? First thing, and this is crucial, don't freak out. I know that's easier said than done, but panic is exactly what the enemy wants. Padre Pio faced down demons that would make your worst nightmare look like a Disney movie. And you know what his secret was. He never let fear take the wheel. Faith did. Here's your step-by-step game plan, and it's based on exactly what Padre Pio would do if he was sitting in your living room right now. Step 1, stop using the rosary immediately. Don't throw it in the trash, don't give it away, and definitely don't try to fix it yourself with holy water or prayers. When you're dealing with something that's been deliberately consecrated to evil, amateur hour spiritual warfare can backfire big time. You wouldn't try to perform surgery on yourself, right? Same principle applies here. Step 2, contain it safely. Find a small box or bag, doesn't need to be anything fancy. Wrap the rosary in a clean cloth and place it inside. This isn't about the object having magical powers to escape or anything dramatic like that. It's about showing respect for the seriousness of the situation and preventing accidental contact by family members, especially children. Now here's where it gets real. You need to get this thing to a priest you trust. Not just any priest, but one who understands spiritual warfare and has experience with these situations. Most parish priests have at least basic training in this area, but if you can find someone who's dealt with similar cases, even better. When you approach the priest, be straightforward. Don't embellish the story or try to make it sound more dramatic than it is. Just explain what you've observed when you acquired the object and why you're concerned. A good priest will take your concerns seriously and examine the rosary properly. What happens next depends on what the priest discovers. If your suspicions are confirmed, he'll likely perform specific prayers, sometimes called minor exorcisms, over the object before destroying it. This usually involves sacred fire, which completely breaks any spiritual attachments the object might have carried. But here's something important that people often miss. You might need spiritual cleansing too. If you've been using a corrupted rosary for weeks or months, there could be lingering spiritual effects that need to be addressed. This isn't about you being possessed or anything Hollywood-level dramatic. It's more like spiritual residue that needs to be cleared away. Your priest might recommend a few things. A good confession if it's been a while. Perhaps some specific prayers for spiritual cleansing. Maybe blessing your home if that's where the disturbances have been happening. Follow his guidance completely. This guy has the training and the sacramental authority to handle these situations properly. What if you can't get to a priest right away? Keep the object contained and continue with your normal spiritual practices using other sacramentals you trust. Don't let this situation derail your prayer life. In fact, this is when you want to double down on the basics. Daily rosary with a legitimate set of beads, regular mass attendance, frequent confession. Here's something Padre Pio would absolutely insist on. Examine your spiritual habits during this time. How did this object enter your life? Are there gaps in your spiritual defenses that need addressing? Sometimes these incidents are wake-up calls to take our spiritual lives more seriously. And let's talk about your family for a minute. If you have kids in the house, they need age-appropriate explanations about what's happening. You don't want to terrify them, but they should understand why they can't touch that particular box and why it's important to stay close to their prayers and sacraments right now. Some people ask if they need to worry about their other religious objects being contaminated. Generally speaking, no. These counterfeit rosaries are individual problems, not contagious spiritual diseases. But it's not a bad idea to have your priest bless your religious items if it gives you peace of mind. The most important thing Padre Pio would want you to remember is this. You're not a victim here. You're a Catholic who recognized a spiritual threat and took appropriate action. That's exactly what a mature faith looks like. The enemy's plan was to deceive and harm you, but instead, you're getting stronger spiritual discernment and deeper trust in the Church's wisdom. This experience, as unsettling as it might be, can actually become a blessing in disguise. It's forcing you to think more carefully about your spiritual life, to develop better discernment, and to appreciate the authentic sacramentals you do have. But prevention is always better than cure, and that's what we need to talk about next. Here's what Padre Pio really understood that most Catholics today have forgotten. Spiritual protection isn't about having the right religious jewelry or the perfect collection of blessed objects. It's about living in such close union with God that darkness can't get a foothold in your life. Think about it this way. Padre Pio experienced more direct demonic attacks than probably any saint in modern history. These weren't just spiritual temptations. We're talking about physical beatings, objects being thrown around his cell, demons appearing in terrifying forms. Yet he lived without fear. Why? Because his spiritual foundation was rock solid. The saint's daily routine tells us everything we need to know about real protection. He'd spend hours in prayer before dawn, celebrate Mass with such devotion that people would weep just watching him, and end each day with extended time before the Blessed Sacrament. His life was so saturated with God's presence that evil literally couldn't stand to be around him. That's your blueprint right there. You want protection that no counterfeit rosary, no occult symbol, no demonic scheme can penetrate? Build a life that looks like Padre Pio's, obviously adapted to your circumstances, but with the same priorities. Start with the Mass. Padre Pio called it the greatest prayer and insisted that everything else flows from what happens at the altar. If you're only hitting Sunday Mass when it's convenient, you're operating with spiritual defenses that have huge gaps. Make weekday Mass a priority whenever possible, even if it's just once or twice during the week. Then there's confession. The saint went to confession daily when possible and insisted that regular confession isn't just about forgiveness. It's about maintaining clear spiritual vision. When you're carrying around venial sins, spiritual pride, or unresolved issues, your ability to discern between good and evil gets cloudy. It's like trying to spot counterfeit money when your vision is blurred. Your prayer life needs to be more than just crisis management. Padre Pio prayed constantly, not just formal prayers, but ongoing conversation with God throughout the day. When prayer becomes as natural as breathing, you develop an interior radar that immediately picks up when something spiritual feels wrong. And let's talk about where you actually get your religious objects. Padre Pio was incredibly careful about this. He recommended established Catholic bookstores, monastery gift shops, or well-known Catholic suppliers with solid reputations. These places have relationships with reliable manufacturers and ensure proper blessings are performed. Avoid random online sellers with no Catholic credentials, street vendors outside churches who aren't connected to the parish, or anyone offering religious goods at prices that seem too good to be true. Quality religious objects cost money to produce properly, and legitimate blessings require time and intention from qualified priests. When you do acquire new sacramentals, have them blessed by your parish priest, even if they supposedly come pre-blessed. It doesn't hurt anything, and it gives you complete confidence in what you're using for prayer. Plus, it connects you with your parish community and gives your priest opportunities to teach you about proper use of sacramentals. Here's something crucial that most people miss. Your home environment matters enormously. Padre Pio's cell was filled with religious images, crucifixes, and blessed objects, but more importantly, it was a place where prayer happened constantly. Your home should feel spiritually different from the secular world around it. That means being intentional about what comes through your door, not just religious objects, but books, entertainment, music, even the conversations you allow in your living space. Create an environment where holiness feels natural and evil feels obviously out of place. Build relationships with other Catholics who take their faith seriously. Padre Pio was surrounded by people who shared his commitment to spiritual growth. When you're trying to develop discernment about spiritual matters, you need friends who can help you think through situations clearly rather than dismiss your concerns or push you toward superstition. Finally, develop a deep devotion to Our Lady. Padre Pio's Rosary wasn't just a prayer routine, it was intimate conversation with the Mother of God, who had proven herself completely trustworthy in every spiritual battle he ever faced. When Mary is truly present in your spiritual life, she becomes your guide for recognizing authentic Catholic devotion versus dangerous counterfeits. This is how you build protection that actually works. Not through fear-based accumulation of blessed objects, but through genuine spiritual maturity that can spot deception from miles away. Look, I get it. This whole topic can feel overwhelming. Maybe you're sitting there right now, looking at your own rosary differently, wondering if you've been as careful as you should have been. Or maybe you're feeling angry that we even have to worry about stuff like this in the first place. But here's what I want you to walk away with today. This isn't about living in fear. This is about living with your eyes wide open. Padre Pio didn't spend his life cowering from spiritual attacks. He faced them head-on with unshakable faith and practical wisdom. That's exactly what we're called to do. The enemy's greatest victory isn't when he tricks you into using a counterfeit rosary. It's when he convinces you that authentic Catholic devotion is somehow dangerous or unreliable. Don't let him win that battle. These spiritual counterfeits exist precisely because the real thing is so powerful. Your rosary, the authentic one, blessed by a priest you trust and prayed with sincere devotion, remains one of heaven's most potent weapons. The fact that the enemy tries to counterfeit it just proves how much he fears it. Here's what I need from you right now. If this message has opened your eyes to something important, if it's given you practical wisdom you didn't have before, write, "Thank you, Saint Padre Pio," in the comments. Your engagement helps YouTube show this urgent warning to more Catholics who need to hear it. And listen, we're not just building a channel here, we're building a community of Catholics who refuse to be deceived. People who love their faith enough to protect it from infiltration and corruption. Every like, every share, every person who becomes a member of this channel strengthens our ability to keep spreading these crucial messages. The Church has faced deception and spiritual warfare since day one, and she's still standing because believers like you take these threats seriously. St. Padre Pio fought his battles so we'd know how to fight ours. Don't let his wisdom go to waste. Stay vigilant, stay faithful, and keep praying that rosary with the confidence that comes from knowing it's authentic. Because when it is, heaven itself backs up every Hail Mary. Have you ever wondered how to recognize when someone is under the devil's influence? We're not talking about possession, that extreme case where evil takes direct control of a person's body, but something far more subtle and much more common, influence itself. Exorcists tell us that the devil has a very specific personality, filled with hatred, pride, lies, and despair. And when someone, through carelessness or rebellion, opens themselves to this action, they begin to mirror these traits. It's as if the enemy leaves invisible marks on their character, signs that manifest in attitudes, words, and reactions. That's why, yes, it's possible to discover when someone is acting under his inspiration. If you believe in Padre Pio's spiritual wisdom and want his protection against evil influences, write in the comments, "Padre Pio, protect me from evil." Your faith can be a shield for others who read your testimony. Today, I'm going to show you the behaviors and signs that allow us to identify the devil's influence in people's lives. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover could change the way you see those around you, and also the way you see yourself. Padre Pio of Pietrelcina, a saint marked by suffering and spiritual warfare, knew the devil face to face. He was struck by him, dragged across the floor, tempted with horrible thoughts, tormented with noises, nauseating smells, and visions of terror. However, he never gave in. He knew how to clearly discern when a soul was under the influence of evil and warned his spiritual children that Satan acts very cunningly, infiltrating little by little. He said, The devil is like a rabid dog on a chain. If you don't get close, he won't bite. But if you get too close, he destroys. But what exactly are these signs that show us the influence of evil? This isn't about obsession or seeing the devil in everything, but about being attentive, vigilant. As St. Peter urges us in his letter, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. 1 Peter 5:8. The signs I'm about to reveal aren't just theoretical concepts. They're real patterns that spiritual directors, exorcists, and saints like Padre Pio have identified through centuries of spiritual warfare. These aren't meant to create fear, but to arm you with knowledge. Because when we can recognize the enemy's tactics, we can defend ourselves and help others break free from his subtle chains. Are you ready to discover what Padre Pio knew about recognizing evil's influence? Let's begin with the first unmistakable sign. Throughout his life, Padre Pio experienced direct attacks from the devil that went far beyond what most of us could imagine. The enemy would physically assault him, leaving visible marks on his body. Witnesses heard terrifying screams coming from his cell at night, sounds that weren't human. The devil would appear to him in disgusting forms, fill his room with putrid odors, and try to break his spirit with blasphemous temptations. Yet through all these attacks, Padre Pio never wavered in his faith. He learned to recognize the enemy's voice, his tactics, and his influence on souls. This wasn't theoretical knowledge for him. It was lived experience earned through decades of spiritual combat. The devil, Padre Pio would tell his spiritual children, is like a rabid dog on a chain. If you don't get close to him, he can't bite you. But if you venture too close, he will tear you apart. This wasn't said to frighten, but to warn. He understood that the devil's greatest weapon isn't his roar. It's his ability to convince us he doesn't exist. Padre Pio had what spiritual directors call the gift of discernment of spirits. He could look at a person and immediately sense whether they were under spiritual attack, living in grace, or somewhere in between. Penitents would come to confession with him, thinking they could hide their sins or their spiritual state, only to have Padre Pio reveal exactly what was troubling their souls before they spoke a word. This gift wasn't just supernatural intuition, it was earned through years of prayer, suffering, and intimate knowledge of how evil operates. He understood that Satan rarely works through dramatic possessions or obvious manifestations. Instead, he prefers subtle influence, slowly poisoning thoughts, gradually hardening hearts, and carefully leading souls away from God's light. As St. Peter warned the early Christians, and as Padre Pio would remind his spiritual children, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. 1 Peter 5:8. The key word here is prowls. The devil doesn't announce himself. He stalks quietly, looking for weakness, for an opening, for just the right moment to strike. That's why recognizing his influence is so crucial for every believer. Now let's dive into the actual signs that reveal when someone is under the devil's influence. Remember, these aren't meant to make us suspicious of everyone around us, but to help us recognize when someone, perhaps even ourselves, needs spiritual help. The first unmistakable sign is rejection of the sacred. When someone who once loved prayer suddenly can't stand being in church, when they feel uncomfortable around a crucifix, when they mock the Mass or feel anger at hearing Jesus' name, this is a red flag. The presence of the holy is clashing with a shadow that has taken residence in their heart. Think about Judas in the Gospel. He walked with Jesus for 3 years. He heard the Sermon on the Mount, witnessed the multiplication of loaves, saw the dead raised to life, yet somewhere along the way he began to resent that divine presence. The light that once attracted him started to burn him from within. St. John tells us clearly, Satan entered into him, John 13:27. This is exactly what happens today. A person might have been devout, faithful, regular at Sunday Mass. Then gradually, they start making excuses. Church becomes boring. Prayer feels pointless. They might even become hostile toward religious conversations or feel physically uncomfortable in the presence of blessed objects. The devil cannot tolerate the sacred because it reminds him of what he lost forever. The second sign is contempt for the Virgin Mary. This one is particularly telling because the devil's hatred for Our Lady runs deeper than almost anything else. In the book of Genesis, God himself promised that she would crush the serpent's head, Genesis 3:15. The devil knows that Mary's humility destroyed his pride, and her yes to God reversed his rebellious no. Padre Pio never tired of praying the Rosary. He called it his weapon. He would sleep with rosary beads in his fingers and recommended it to everyone who came to him. He used to say that Mary was the sure refuge against all temptations. Exorcists know that when they invoke the Virgin Mary during their work, demons tremble and scream with rage. So when someone feels repulsion toward the Rosary, ridicules Marian devotion, or speaks badly of Our Lady, this is a very clear trail of diabolic influence. It's not a matter of different theological preferences or cultural backgrounds. There's something deeper happening when a person cannot tolerate the Mother of God. I remember hearing about a woman who had been a daily Mass attendee for decades. She had a beautiful statue of Our Lady in her garden and prayed the Rosary every evening. Then slowly, things began to change. First, she started skipping the Rosary, saying she didn't have time. Then she moved the statue of Mary to a closet because it didn't match her decor anymore. Finally, she began speaking sarcastically about all this Mary worship in her parish. Her family was confused. What had happened to their devout mother and grandmother? A wise priest recognized the pattern and helped her through prayer and the sacraments to break free from the subtle influence that had crept into her life. The third sign is despair, that profound sadness that leads a soul to believe there's no forgiveness, that their sins are too great, that it's no longer worth praying or fighting. The devil whispers in the ear, "You're worthless. There's no way out for you. God could never love someone like you." This is the same strategy used with Judas after his betrayal. The devil didn't just lead him to sin, he pushed him toward despair and suicide. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, just like Judas betrayed him. But Peter ran to mercy while Judas ran to despair. The difference wasn't in the gravity of their sins, but in their response to guilt. Padre Pio warned that fear and despair are the devil's weapons. Fear is worse than the devil himself because it paralyzes faith. In contrast, God's voice always invites us to mercy and calls us to rise again. Even when we've fallen badly, even when we've committed serious sins, God's voice says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. The voice of despair says, "It's over for you." The voice of God says, "Let's begin again." When someone is trapped in despair, unable to believe in forgiveness, convinced that their situation is hopeless, this often indicates that the enemy has gained a foothold in their thoughts and emotions. These first 3 signs, rejection of the sacred, contempt for Mary, and spiritual despair, often work together. They form a pattern that gradually separates a soul from the sources of grace and mercy that could heal them. But here's where we need practical weapons for spiritual warfare. You know, as I've been sharing about these spiritual battles, I can't help but think about the countless people who've asked me, how do I protect myself? What weapons did Padre Pio actually use? Well, just like Padre Pio relied on the Rosary as his primary weapon against these very attacks we're discussing, we too need that same spiritual armor. That's exactly why we created the ebook, The Power of the Rosary with Padre Pio, Miracles, Protection, and Divine Graces. This isn't just another prayer book. It's a complete spiritual warfare manual. You'll discover how to pray the Rosary with the same devotion Padre Pio had, learn from actual testimonies of miraculous protection, and access his most powerful teachings about prayer. Plus, you'll get a 30-day prayer guide with daily intentions and special prayers for protection, healing, and liberation that Padre Pio himself recommended. The link is pinned in the comments, and honestly, after what we're about to cover next, you'll understand why this spiritual protection is so crucial, because the remaining signs we need to discuss are even more serious. The fourth sign of diabolic influence is slavery to sin. Now, all of us fall, all of us are tempted, but there's a difference between normal spiritual struggle and the chains that drag someone again and again into the same abyss, without strength to resist. St. Paul described this perfectly. I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I practice. Romans 7:19. The devil takes advantage of our weaknesses to transform them into shackles. It might start as a simple temptation, a quick look at something we shouldn't, a small lie to avoid consequences, a moment of anger that we don't control. But gradually, what seemed like isolated incidents become patterns, then habits, then addictions. This isn't about occasional falls that we confess and try to overcome. This is about a person who feels completely powerless against certain sins, as if an invisible force keeps pulling them back no matter how hard they try to break free. They might cry after falling, promise themselves it will never happen again, even pray desperately for strength, yet find themselves repeating the same destructive behaviors. Padre Pio advised confessing even weekly because he understood that confession doesn't just erase sin, it breaks the invisible chains with which the evil one binds souls. He would tell his penitents, "The devil is like a fisherman. He throws his hook with attractive bait, but once you bite, he pulls you deeper and deeper until you can't find your way back to the surface." The fifth sign is hatred of the Eucharist. The Blessed Sacrament is the real presence of Christ, and the devil trembles before it. This is why when someone feels repulsion, mockery, anger, or even nausea when facing the altar, it's a sign of dark influence. During Mass, you might notice someone who can't stay still during the consecration, who feels compelled to leave the church at the moment of communion, or who experiences physical discomfort specifically during the Eucharistic prayer. This isn't about feeling bored during a long homily or being tired after a busy week. This is a visceral reaction to the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Padre Pio spent hours before the tabernacle, crying, offering, struggling. He would celebrate Mass in such a way that people could see he was in direct contact with the divine mystery. He knew that there was the source of victory against evil. He once said, "It would be easier for the world to survive without the sun than to do without Holy Mass." The devil knows this. That's why he works so hard to keep people away from the Eucharist, to make them feel unworthy of communion, to create distractions during the most sacred moments of the Mass, or to fill them with skepticism about the real presence. The sixth sign is the manifestation of strange phenomena, night noises, shadows that move, pestilent smells without explanation, objects that fall by themselves, electronic devices that malfunction repeatedly in someone's presence. Padre Pio lived through all of this. The devil would bang on the walls of his cell, insult him with horrible voices, attack him physically. Fellow friars would hear furniture being thrown around in his room, only to find Padre Pio praying calmly the next morning, sometimes with new bruises on his body that he couldn't explain naturally. But here's what's crucial to understand. These phenomena don't happen in isolation. They typically occur around someone who is either in intense spiritual battle against evil, or someone who has opened doors to dark influences through occult practices, persistent grave sins, or rejection of God's grace. I once heard from a priest about a family who contacted him because their teenage son's room had become the center of disturbing activity. Pictures would fall from walls. His computer would turn on by itself, playing disturbing sounds. Visitors would feel an oppressive atmosphere when entering his space. When the priest investigated, he discovered the young man had been experimenting with Ouija boards and had developed an obsession with dark music and imagery that glorified evil. The phenomena weren't random. They were connected to choices that had opened spiritual doors that should have remained closed. Through prayer, fasting, confession, and removing all occult objects from the home, the family was able to restore peace. Exorcists say that when these manifestations appear around someone, it's a sign that there's a strong spiritual battle happening. The response isn't fear, but prayer, blessed water, the sign of the cross, and the invocation of Jesus' name. However, we must be wise here. Not every strange occurrence is diabolic. Sometimes there are natural explanations. Old houses make noises, electrical systems malfunction, people have medical conditions that affect their perceptions. The key is the pattern and the context. When these phenomena occur alongside other signs we've discussed, rejection of the sacred, inability to pray, spiritual despair, then we need to consider spiritual causes. Padre Pio taught that the devil prefers to work in darkness and secrecy. When his influence begins to manifest in visible ways, it often means the spiritual battle is intensifying. But this can actually be a good sign. It means the person's soul is fighting back, even if they don't realize it consciously. And now we come to the final 3 signs, and these might be the most dangerous of all. The 7th sign is the inability to pray. I'm not talking about normal laziness or tiredness that we all experience sometimes. This is a kind of revulsion, an almost unbearable weight, a physical impossibility of pronouncing a prayer. It's as if invisible hands were covering their mouth every time they try to speak to God. Saint Teresa of Avila said that when we don't feel like praying, that's exactly when we need to pray the most. But this goes deeper than not feeling motivated. This is about people who literally cannot form the words of prayer, who feel suffocated when they try to focus on God, or who experience panic attacks when they attempt to enter into prayer. The devil knows that prayer is our lifeline to heaven. It's through prayer that we receive grace, strength, and guidance. Cut off that connection, and a soul becomes spiritually malnourished and vulnerable to every temptation. That's why one of his primary tactics is to create barriers between us and God in prayer. Padre Pio insisted, pray much, even when it costs you. The devil flees from persevering prayer. He understood that sometimes the greatest victories in prayer happen when it feels most difficult. The enemy fights hardest against what threatens him most. When someone finds themselves unable to pray, the solution isn't to give up, but to fight through it with simple, short prayers. Even just saying, Jesus, or help me, can break through the spiritual static that the enemy creates. The Rosary becomes particularly powerful here because the repetitive nature of the prayers can help overcome the mental blocks that prevent deeper prayer. The 8th sign is irrational violence. The Gospel tells us that the devil is a murderer from the beginning, John 8:44. When someone transforms, without apparent reason, into a whirlwind of hatred, screaming, insults, and destruction, it's as if a flame of fury has taken control from within. Now we need to be careful here. Mental illness is real. Psychological trauma can cause violent outbursts. Medical conditions can affect behavior dramatically. We're not suggesting that every angry person is under demonic influence, but sometimes the root goes deeper than psychology or chemistry. The violence we're talking about has certain characteristics. It often targets specifically religious objects or people. The person might be calm one moment and then explode with disproportionate rage when presented with a crucifix, holy water, or when someone begins to pray. The violence might be accompanied by knowledge they shouldn't have, strength beyond their normal capacity, or a voice that doesn't sound quite like their own. Padre Pio experienced this kind of irrational hatred directed toward him. People under strong diabolic influence would sometimes attack him verbally or even physically during confession, not because of anything he had done wrong, but because the evil within them couldn't tolerate his holiness. The response to this kind of violence isn't violence in return, but prayer, patience, and sometimes professional help that combines both psychological and spiritual approaches. Many times, what appears to be purely a mental health issue has spiritual roots that need to be addressed alongside medical treatment. And now we come to the 9th sign, perhaps the most dangerous of all: spiritual pride. Lucifer fell because he wanted to be like God, and he drags many souls down with the same deception. You don't need to confess, you don't need the church, it's just between you and God. This false autonomy is deadly poison. The person begins to believe they've evolved beyond the need for traditional religious practices. They might say things like, "I'm spiritual but not religious," or "I have a direct connection with God that doesn't require intermediaries." While this might sound humble or even enlightened, it often masks a deep pride. Padre Pio, humble to the point of tears, always obeyed the church, even when they humiliated him, when they prohibited him from celebrating Mass publicly, when they treated him unjustly. He understood that humility and obedience are the devil's greatest enemies. The devil cannot stand obedience or humility. When a soul distances itself from obedience to legitimate spiritual authority, it enters dangerous territory. Pride whispers, "You know better than the church. You're more enlightened than these simple believers. You don't need their rules and regulations." This spiritual pride often develops gradually. Someone might start by questioning certain teachings, then rejecting the authority of their parish priest, then deciding they don't need the sacraments, and finally convincing themselves that they're their own spiritual authority. Each step seems reasonable in isolation, but together they lead a soul away from the protection and grace that come through the church. The antidote to spiritual pride is what Padre Pio practiced constantly: humility, obedience, and recognition of our complete dependence on God's grace. He would often say, "I am nothing but a poor friar who prays." Despite his extraordinary spiritual gifts, his stigmata, and his fame throughout the world, he never stopped seeing himself as simply a servant of God and the Church. When we recognize these signs, whether in ourselves or others, the response isn't panic or judgment, but compassionate action. We pray for the person, we seek appropriate help, and we trust that God's mercy is stronger than any diabolic influence. But how do we actually fight back? Let me show you the weapons Padre Pio used every single day. My dear brothers and sisters, these are the signs we must watch with careful attention, not to judge or condemn others, but to pray, to help, and to open our eyes to spiritual realities around us. The devil wants to go unnoticed. He wants us to think he doesn't exist, that everything can be explained away by psychology or circumstance alone. But when we discover his tracks, we weaken his power over souls. And we have incredibly powerful weapons at our disposal: frequent confession that breaks the chains of sin, the Holy Mass where heaven touches earth, the Rosary that terrifies demons, fasting that strengthens our spiritual muscles, holy water that sanctifies our homes, blessed medals that carry protection, and concrete acts of charity toward those most in need. Every one of these spiritual practices deals a blow to the enemy's influence. When we live sacramentally, pray consistently, and serve others sacrificially, we create an atmosphere where evil cannot take root. I want to invite you now to share in the comments if you've ever noticed any of these signs in your life or in someone close to you. Have you felt rejection towards sacred things? Have you struggled with despair? Have you witnessed strange phenomena in your home, Your testimony in the comments could help others recognize what's happening in their own lives and seek the help they need. Also, please share your prayer intentions with our community. We are a spiritual family, and your needs will be carried in the prayers and rosaries of many faithful souls who watch this channel. There's power when believers unite in prayer for one another. Share this video with someone who might need to hear these truths. Maybe there's someone you love who is under a dark influence and needs to understand what's happening to them. Do this out of charity, out of love for souls who are suffering and searching for answers. Remember always, Christ has already won the victory. The devil can roar, he can deceive, he can create chaos, but he is defeated. And whoever holds Mary's hand never gets lost. Padre Pio knew this truth and lived it every day of his life, even through the most intense spiritual battles. You too can experience this victory over evil. Don't be afraid of the spiritual battle. Be prepared for it. Heaven is promised to those who persevere in faith, and no force of hell can snatch you from God's hands if you remain faithful to Him. Before you go, I want to ask for your help in spreading Padre Pio's wisdom to more souls who desperately need this spiritual guidance. We're building a community of believers committed to sharing the truth about spiritual warfare and God's protection. If this message touched your heart, please hit the like button. It helps more people discover these life-changing teachings. Share this video with your family and friends who need spiritual strength, and consider becoming a channel member to support our mission of bringing Padre Pio's wisdom to souls around the world. Together, we can be instruments of God's light in a world that desperately needs hope and truth.